At his younger brother's funeral, Marcus Bennett wasn't just mourning. He was arrested, all because of a fabricated report from HOA President Laura Whitaker. For years, she had wielded her authority to dominate, intimidate, and penalize anyone she considered unworthy of her pristine community. This time, she intended to send a message. But there was one detail she hadn't anticipated. Marcus's father, Samuel Bennett, was the U.S. Attorney General. And with a single phone call, her world unraveled in ways she never saw coming, delivering a long overdue reckoning. That morning, Samuel Bennett had laid his son to rest. The grief bore down on him like a collapsing sky, pressing him into the earth. Each breath was a deliberate act, as though he had to will himself to keep going. The cold, wet ground seeped through his shoes, but he stood motionless, unable to shift even an inch. His body felt foreign, a hollow vessel abandoned to endure this final farewell. The casket descended slowly, its polished black surface reflecting the overcast sky. The ropes creaked under its weight, the pulleys whispering a faint groan, each sound slicing into his already shattered spirit. The sharp scent of freshly turned soil mingled with the cloying sweetness of funeral lilies, the air thick with a sorrow, so dense it threatened to suffocate him. Beside him, Marcus stood stiffly, his fists clenched until his knuckles blanched. His breathing came in jagged bursts, his shoulders trembling faintly but noticeably. His face, so like his brother's, was contorted in a mix of anguish and barely contained fury. His dark eyes blazed with a grief too vast to release, consuming him from within. Samuel longed to reach out, to rest a steadying hand on his son's shoulder, to offer some shred of comfort. But he couldn't. What solace could he give when his own pain was an unhealing wound, when his youngest son, his baby, was gone forever? Then she arrived, a tempest breaking the fragile stillness. Laura Whitaker, the self-appointed ruler of the neighborhood, strode in with an air that disrupted everything. She had made it her mission to enforce her rigid vision of perfection on everyone around her. Dressed impeccably in a tailored cream coat, untouched by the cemetery's dampness, her ash-blonde hair was styled in a precise bob that hinted at wealth and meticulous care. Her surgically enhanced brows arched in feigned concern, her lips pursed as though her mere presence were a gift to all. Flanking her were two uniformed officers, their faces blank, awaiting her command like loyal hounds. The moment Samuel saw them, a sickening dread twisted in his stomach. Laura wasn't here to grieve. She wasn't here out of respect. She had another purpose, one that promised trouble. "There he is," she declared, her voice cutting through the heavy silence like a blade. Her manicured finger jabbed toward Marcus. "That's him," she pressed on, her tone swelling with sanctimonious outrage. "He's trespassing. He doesn't even live here anymore. Arrest him." For a fleeting moment, silence reigned, as if the world itself recoiled at the absurdity of her words. Then chaos erupted. Marcus's head whipped toward her, his anguished eyes narrowing into sharp fury. His mouth opened, but whatever he meant to say drowned in the uproar that followed. Samuel's chest ignited with a fire that transcended grief, a searing, violent rage. His muscles tightened, his jaw clenched until it ached. His heartbeat roared in his ears. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the mourners, quickly escalating into cries of indignation. "What is this? Are you serious? She can't do this." But Laura stood resolute, arms crossed, her chin tilted slightly upward, a gleam of triumph in her eyes. She had come to assert her dominance, and she reveled in it. "Sir," one officer said to Marcus, his voice flat and detached, the tone of someone simply following orders. "You need to come with us." Marcus barked a bitter, humorless laugh, edged with something volatile. His fists tightened further, his body taut as a bowstring. "Are you kidding me?" His voice was raw, dripping with incredulity. "This is my brother's funeral." The officer hesitated, just a flicker, but it was enough for Samuel to notice, enough to suspect that even they sensed the wrongness of this. Yet it didn't matter. Laura had spoken, and in this neighborhood, her word was gospel. Samuel stepped forward, but before he could intervene, his brother gripped his arm, a silent caution. "Not now. Not here." But the inferno within him blazed brighter. The officers advanced, one seizing Marcus's wrist. Then pandemonium. Marcus resisted, his voice rising in a desperate, furious crescendo as he twisted against their hold. They were too quick, too strong. The sharp snap of handcuffs rang out, piercing the air. Gasps, shouts, and a scream erupted from the crowd. Samuel's fists balled as he watched, helpless, as his only remaining son was torn from his side. Marcus's eyes locked with his father's, wild, disbelieving, begging for intervention. But it didn't stop. The officers dragged him toward their car, boots crunching over the wet grass, their uniforms stark against the muted cemetery backdrop. Samuel could do nothing, not yet. And Laura? She stood there, arms still crossed, watching with that same smug satisfaction. For a brief moment, her lips twitched into a faint smirk. That was when Samuel understood. This wasn't about rules or HOA policies. This was about power. And Laura Whitaker had just picked the wrong family to challenge. Laura had always been a scourge, a despot cloaked in high-end fashion, ruling the neighborhood like a monarch. She didn't earn power through admiration, but through relentless control. To her, the HOA presidency wasn't just a position, it was a crown. She thrived on it, lived for the thrill of scrutinizing lawns, issuing fines, and sending thinly veiled threats disguised as polite emails. She knew every regulation, every loophole, and wielded them with surgical precision to excise anyone who didn't conform to her sanitized, homogeneous ideal of the community. But this was a new depth of malice. Even for Laura, with her obsessive grip on neighborhood standards, this was unprecedented. Her official excuse was rooted in the HOA's labyrinthine rules, one buried in fine print no one bothered to read. Non-residents couldn't attend private community events without prior approval. To Laura, a funeral, even in a public cemetery, qualified. And Marcus, though raised in that neighborhood, no longer lived there. In her eyes, that made him an interloper, a trespasser. The real reason, though, was far uglier, far more personal. Laura had nursed a vendetta against Marcus for years. It began at a community meeting, one of those stifling gatherings in the HOA clubhouse where residents sat on rigid chairs while Laura lectured about fence heights and trash bin placement. She'd been pontificating about safety concerns when Marcus, then a teenager, stood up and called her out. He didn't shout or swear, just calmly exposed what others feared to voice. Laura never minded when white teens lingered in the park after dark, but when black kids, locals like him, did the same, it was suddenly a problem. The room had fallen silent. Laura's smile had been tight, controlled, but her eyes seethed with something venomous. She never forgot that humiliation, never forgave it. To her, Marcus's defiance was a wound that festered. So when she spotted him at his brother's funeral, she didn't see a man in mourning. She saw a chance to settle the score, to reassert her dominance. She didn't need overt racism to strike, just the right words to twist the system in her favor. And when she, with her polished indignation, labeled Marcus a trespasser, the officers didn't question it. They saw a white woman pointing at a black man and acted on instinct. Because people like Laura always knew how to bend authority to their will. Samuel stormed into the police station, a torrent of fury wrapped in a crisp black suit. His every step reverberated with purpose, his polished shoes striking the worn linoleum like a countdown to detonation. The desk officer barely looked up, exuding the indifference of a system that had crushed too many like Marcus. The air reeked of stale coffee, ink, and faint despair, a place that had caged far too many who didn't belong. Samuel's gaze swept the holding area, locking onto Marcus. His son sat on a metal bench behind bars, hands resting loosely between his knees. He wasn't slumped, but nor was he rigid, just still, with the weary calm of someone who'd been here before, who knew protests of innocence changed nothing. His jaw was tight, his face blank, but his eyes simmered with a quiet, enduring rage. Samuel's breath steadied, his pulse a deliberate rhythm. He wouldn't shout, he'd deny them that victory. This demanded something colder, more potent. "We're processing him for trespassing and disorderly conduct," the officer monotoned, eyes still on his paperwork, treating Marcus like just another file. Samuel said nothing at first, letting the silence thicken. Then, with precise calm, he drew his wallet, flipped it open, and slid a card onto the desk. The soft sound of leather on wood was unremarkable, but its impact was immediate. The officer glanced down, expecting routine ID. Then he froze. His face paled as realization hit. His posture snapped rigid, fingers twitching around his pen. He looked up, meeting Samuel's unflinching stare, and squirmed. U.S. Attorney General Samuel Bennett. Not just a lawyer, not just a judge, the nation's top law enforcement officer. Release him now, Samuel said, his voice low, lethal, an order brooking no defiance. The officer obeyed, because the alternative was unthinkable. Back in her HOA office, Laura Whitaker lounged in smug triumph. Her manicured nails tapped the mahogany desk as she sifted through violation notices, each a trophy in her quest for order. The room smelled of costly floral candles, a synthetic elegance that mirrored her forced perfection. Everything was aligned. Marcus Bennett was humbled, the funeral incident resolved, her authority reaffirmed. Her phone rang, an unknown number. She answered without hesitation, still reviewing a driveway basketball hoop violation she'd soon crush. Laura Whitaker, she said, clipped and poised. A pause. Then a voice, deep, measured, chilling. This is Samuel Bennett. Her pen slipped, clattering to the floor. Her mind scrambled, the name jarring her reality. Her grip on the phone tightened, as if it could anchor her. The same, he confirmed, his tone pure steel. Her breath hitched. She'd known Samuel was a lawyer. His name had surfaced in HOA disputes she'd tried to manipulate. But the Attorney General? Her heartbeat thundered. I strongly suggest you get a lawyer, MS. Whitaker, he continued, each word a veiled dagger. By week's end, you'll face charges for filing a false police report, harassment, and discrimination. Her mouth dried. She tried to speak, to protest, but silence swallowed her. This wasn't an HOA squabble. This was federal, criminal. Samuel wasn't bluffing. After freeing Marcus, he'd set justice in motion. Subpoenas soon hit the HOA board, exposing a trail of Laura's abuses, fines and evictions targeting Black and Latino residents, a pattern of discrimination laid bare. Testimonies poured in from former residents, amplified by social media outrage. Marcus filed a lawsuit, false imprisonment, emotional distress, civil rights violations, with Laura as the defendant. The media feasted. HOA president arrests man at brother's funeral. Father turns out to be attorney general. Leaked footage of Marcus's arrest sealed her fate. The officers who'd cuffed him faced a judge, their confidence gone, now defendants in a civil rights case. Laura's empire collapsed. Board members resigned. Her reputation shattered. Samuel escalated it further, launching a Justice Department probe into the HOA's systemic bias. Laura's tearful TV apology, blaming miscommunication, fooled no one. In court, Marcus prevailed, winning a hefty settlement and forcing HOA reforms. Laura lost everything, her job, her home, her power, left alone in a hollow shell of her former life. Outside the courthouse, Marcus stood victorious, the sun casting long shadows as reporters swarmed. His thoughts drifted to his brother. Justice couldn't bring him back, but it had struck hard. Samuel's hand gripped his shoulder. He'd be proud of you, he said. Marcus nodded, voice soft. Yeah, I think so. They walked away, unbroken, while across town, Laura watched a new family move in. Young, Black, vibrant, powerless now to stop them, her reign reduced to dust.